13 days and counting. Brace yourselves. It's gonna be interesting, to say the least, I'm sure.
Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the almost daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's talk Trump.
Coughing fit, right at the top of the show. Way to start the day. 1 second, please. Hello and namaste, dear listeners. It's Saturday, January 9th at 11:45 a.m. and I am your eccentric, yet authentic host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Charmingly, always actually myself, despite aspiring to be a fictional character. Always real, raw, and radically unscripted. Except for when I've written a bit and I'm reading a thing, you know. Today is one of those days, folks. I am at a loss for words. And I'm also wondering if I've already said this on the show sometime in the last 48 hours. But even if I have, it was probably buried deep in the middle, so it's really worth repeating. I had this moment where, you know how things just hit you? And I wrote down right then in the moment. This app doesn't show me unless I look for it somewhere, and I don't know where it is here in the phone version. But I wrote down, good Lord, it just hit me. In the minds of the true believers in the Trumptopian base, January 6th, in bunny ears quotes, making them with my hands as I read it to you, January 6th will slowly become their own personal, real-life V for Vendetta, with quotes around it because it's a title, like a living memory mythology of their own personal, private, real-life V for Vendetta, except it's like T for Trumptopia. And I sat there really processing how much that kind of really troubled me. Realizing that one way or the other, and all kidding aside, whether or not an overt reference to the movie, and don't sue me, whoever owns the movie, it's a pop cultural icon, and plenty of others have been using and invoking its image and references to it without proper permission and licensing and blah, 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 blah. So I shouldn't get tagged for it. And it's a brilliant movie, and I get it. And some people claim that it's set in 2020, but I recently watched it during 2020 because I saw the memes starting to make the rounds about how it supposedly is set in 2020. And I rewatched it, and I didn't make a note. I really should have done a real-time commentary audio recording of myself watching it at the time. But if I remember correctly, it occurred to me to put it on at the end of already having been watching things late into the evening, and I was ready to pass the fuck out. And I put it on, and I had some thoughts, and I thought to myself, I need to watch this again sometime soon, in broad daylight, and not, into my nighttime cannabis practice of please help me sleep, cannabis, because I'm a lifelong insomniac. Because, at that point I'm ready to sleep. And during the day, I wouldn't be. And so we'll put a pin in that. Put it up on the cork board of things to come back to. And or maybe find in the already existing content. Because I think I've talked about the movie before. It's probably not headlining any particular episode. But enjoy it when you come across whatever delicious little nugget about that reference in that movie and my thoughts about it. But let me come back to this aha moment I had. And I don't know. I mean, maybe others have already thought this. I don't think this is being said on the mainstream media. I don't think I'm parroting CNN when I bring this idea forth to you, friends. Because I think, like I was saying, whether or not that movie is overtly included in the process for any given individual or the collective, the hardest core of the hardcore Trump base is likely to cling to him for as long as possible. And when historical events are participated in, either directly or indirectly, vis-a-vis, guilt by association and wishful thinking and self-projection and all those other nifty tools and psychological terms for when we, appropriate an event and associate ourselves with it. And I'm not making wild accusations, right? I'm speaking in the academic, in the theoretical. And then how do we come back to our reality, having explored something sort of like academically, theoretically speaking? Consider it. Consider it with me, friends. January 6th was an epic, wild, where were you when you sat slack-jawed in front of a screen somewhere and watched events unfold? And did you stay up late enough into the night to watch Mike Pence, red in the face, certify the Biden-Harris ticket and fulfill his ceremonial, sort of bureaucratic, institutional gears grinding away? This is evidence that we've checked it, and this is us asserting it's been checked. Sort of ceremony of American democracy, right? Like, that's what that was. And to make a point, this is something that's been made all over mainstream media. I think I speculated because I wasn't 100% sure, but I've double checked and I've seen other people confirm it and affirm it. So to the best of my understanding, although I do not believe this is just me buying into mainstream media lies, I think this is a solid and valid interpretation of constitutional American law and policy and protocol, revolving around the vice president. The things that Donald Trump was implying and suggesting that Pence could do, might do, should do, would do, the whole notion that Pence could reject the slate of electoral college electoral votes from the body from each state out of hand after the Trump administration / campaign having exhausted their legal, rightful opportunities to contest close, questionable outcomes and multiple recounts and recertifications. And, for the record here, I don't want to be accused of having said otherwise. When the election was too close to call and there was already buzz of certain key states being, either automatically triggering or possibly being pressured or asked or, correctly, there's a normal presidential approach to requesting a recount. But there's various ways he could have gone about it, right? I said, recount them all. Why not? If Trump's going to be a beyond the pale, over the top, flirting with tyranny, sociopath of jerking America off, because that's what he's been doing, right? Like, he's having fun. And he's complicit with whatever the state system is, whether you think that's a completely evil, nefarious lizard people, robots, cyber zombies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I almost loathe to mention some of the most vile ones because they're not worth repeating to a certain degree until undeniable, verifiable truth and confessions come out. Now, mind you, Amaya, don't get me wrong. I'm not a turn a blind eye to all the questions kind of guy. Put a pin in that situation. My point is, there's no denying that Trump, in and of himself, never mind any conspiracy theory or counter-conspiracy theory about him, never mind any criminal theory about him, Trump himself, as he has spoken/behaved while in office, limit the evidence to that, not the commentary about it, just his words and his actions. In my humble opinion, to the best of my awareness and familiarity with, that's a tough one to roll, my awareness and familiarity with said evidence, his words and his actions, I am comfortable asserting that I too would conclude that Trump incited the event that happened at the Capitol building. And that while there may very well be people there that weren't 100% MAGA, that you could label infiltrators, that group was the group standing, to the best of my understanding, that group that was at the Capitol building was the group standing in front of Trump and Giuliani and Don Jr. and whoever the fuck else was there when Trump gave his speech just hours before the failed Capitol building Trumptopian coup d'etat. I think I like coup d'etat best, just because it's cool and it's French and it reminds us that, language is funny that way. But it must, be respected and acknowledged here that we've come to this point in the conversation that the Democrats, led by Pelosi, and a lot of people on the Trump side have a lot of wild and kind of grotesque opinions about Pelosi, and the proof that if your political rhetoric leads you to just gross, vile, disgusting character assassination, name calling, and hateful speech with no meaningful grasp on policy and actual actions taken, or anchored upon flawed and misleading understandings or misinterpretations or misrepresentations of her words and actions and policy choices. That's the thing, right? And no one should misunderstand me as to be implying some blind faith belief that the Team Blue, that politicians on that side are all 100% virtuous and, saintly spewers of nothing but factual truth. Politicians are politicians. Are they playing certain roles? Absolutely. Team Blue is currently the team bestowed with the role of, righteous defender of all that is normal. Now, we can get into a very interesting discussion about what is normal, and you'll enjoy my previous remarks on what I believe normal is. There should be an episode with a fun custom cover image floating around somewhere in the pile of content that proclaims that the old normal didn't even really exist, or something to that effect. Go check that one out for some earful of my thoughts on normal. The GOP has for decades now, right? Because this is not something new, and this is not something that Trump invented, nor am I pretending to accuse him of that. Trump is a complicit product of the system that's been around since long before Ronald Reagan was in office. And I am an individual who, although I did have a Facebook page or a YouTube channel or a podcast to distribute on those platforms at that time, I wish I did. the things I would have said at that age. And I'll admit, I was, young, but I was politically aware for my age. And sure, there were limitations to that. And I'm not pretending otherwise. But I was a pretty savvy young individual. And I was fascinated and intrigued with the socio-political environment and the cultural milieu I found myself in here when I arrived. And that is, in fact, deeply informed by our media culture and how some of our media becomes larger-than-life mythos. V for Vendetta already is, right? I mean, where did QAnon get the Anon bit from? Q has become its own thing, right? If I remember correctly, and unless was misled by some fake news of some source I wasn't able to detect at the time, the original Anon group has disavowed Q or tried to expose them as political psyop. Where I felt validated for suspecting that this Q prophecy nonsense was pretty psyop-y sounding when the original Anon group, which despite some things I didn't agree with, had basically my respect, although I wasn't a member and I didn't want to participate in it because they did some things I didn't want to be involved in, right? But they definitely weren't quite as outrageous and crazy, although they had their own various splinter groups long before. Listen, I try to extend my respect and fundamental human love to all human individuals, independent of whatever ideology and groups or labels or tribes they might belong to or self-identify with, because that's the calling, folks. And it's hard work, right? But we're supposed to help each other set those things down, not fight each other about them. And dare I say, what Trump has done is toxic. He's created a cult of personality that has already sort of bifurcated in a sort of toxic, carcinogenic way and created an inner but sidebar, almost unrelated cult of special prophecy that I don't think he's directly in control of, right? I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe he himself is Q. From what I've seen, and I can't claim to see it all. I can't claim to have done a documentary level investigative research into it. And I'm not pretending to, and I'm not, but from what I have heard and what I've been told from people who identify themselves as Q followers, and what the content I've been shown and the warnings I've been given to watch out, something's coming, which has always been a goalpost that gets shifted almost immediately as it's set. Nobody they prophesized would be in jail is in jail. Nobody they said would get arrested and held accounted for, whatever. And some of them, I agree, should get arrested and get held accountable for the things they've done, right? I'm not an absolutist thinker. I don't believe any person is absolutely evil. But here's what that means when you understand that position completely. We all have the white wolf and the black wolf within us. We all have yin and the yang. We all have the light and the dark within us. We're not supposed to fight the evil bad guys. We are the evil bad guys. We're supposed to heal ourselves and become the kind, forgiving, saving heroes. Dare I suggest, my friends. And the game of it is, especially now in this postmodern politics of psyop, of open, overt, right there on the surface of it, mindfuckery, is that everybody's, sheep in wolves' clothing and wolves in sheep's clothing, pretending to be the opposite of what they were in the beginning, and it gets crazy difficult to tell what's what. And now I'm going to turn it, without any further ado, to my own close, personal, animatronic, collaborative partner and musical imaginary friend, DJ Zed. with a little ditty he calls Mediocrity Abounds, a dark matter techno music pack groove pad, digitally created danceable music thingamabob for your audio entertainment. This unprecedented moment in human history, really, but in the history of this nation state, we commonly refer to by the acronym US of A, which, you know, in the fictional world I stay up late at night about fretting over. We could call it the EOT, right? The Empire of Trumptopia. Or the United Empires of Trumptopia. The United States of the Empire of Trumptopia. I don't know. I'll figure it out. It's all working titles till I finally get around to fleshing out the weird outlines that I have into actual workable content. But I digress. In real life, we've lived through quite a mind-blowing presidential cycle. And remarkably, with 13 and, 12 and a half days left, the disparity between the pace at which we can drive our intellectual life and the pace at which the mechanisms of democracy were crafted to work at is clearly visible, right? Like you can sort of really understand that, wow, the founding fathers lived in a completely different headspace. And we live in such a micro attenuated multi-cycle breaking news every freaking hour, attention deficit disorder sort of lifestyle that's now ingrained and inherent in our effing politics, right? It's like the very fact that there's been a social media uproar and the perceived need by the platform, infamously used by the president throughout his career and into his political power, to distribute his insanity and his lies and his misdirection and his implied dog whistles and his overt dog whistles and all of his radical, agitative, insightful speech finally banned him, right? That Twitter finally banned him, and that there's this uproar. It's adorable. There's a lot of folks all butthurt about Twitter banning Trump that in the Venn diagram of corporations have rights and corporations have people too, and corporations don't need to provide services to people we hate like the gays. It's kind of hilarious that they're so upset. I thought corporations were people with rights too, yo. But no, not now. Now that they're taking a pretty bold and intense stance. Obviously, there are real legitimate questions of corporate power, corporate overreach. And there are also problems with the fact that there's an abundance of hyper, unwarranted vilification of anybody and everybody that opposes Trump. That's not only something that Trump does, that's something that Trump has successfully hyper-normalized in his career, not just while he was in office, right? He primed the pump, building the audience back in the day when he was a skeezy reality TV show celebrity. B-list at best. C-list, really. The B-listers weren't that excited to hang out with him at the time, so And I know that I take stabs at him. He's got to be brought down low. The reason that cult personalities work is because they sell an image of themselves that's better than the truth. And when the truth sort of gets in the way, it eventually topples, it unthrones that better than reality image that has been sort of captivating the mind's attention. With 13 days left, the coalition that has stood in opposition to Trump is itself in a whirlwind of different opinions. And there's much debate and or disagreement about whether or not to try and pursue these sort of standard, not fast enough, not swift enough actions. And there's, whatever level of potential corruption and complicity that the deeper machines and machinations of the left end of the spectrum might have going on with them as well. But in terms of understanding, why some of these tools are being considered despite the ridiculously brief period of time left, there are some interesting, factoids worthy of consideration. While I've generally been supportive of trying to bring about the activation of the 25th Amendment, I've always understood that it's the most uphill battle of the various options, because Trump has successfully redesigned the swamp enough in his own image and restocked the waters of the swamp with his own pet baby monsters that at no time was it going to be truly viable, given all the hurdles and the way that even if it sort of seems to be successfully activated, there's still this like rinse repeat cycle of contestability with that. And like, if you don't, go do your own due diligence, but if you bring that against a president, and there's two different provisions, and I forget their titles right now, forgive me. One of the provisions under this mechanism has already, has been used. It's the one commonly used when a president has in the past had to have surgery and has been under anesthesia, right? And so they can waive their rights and shuffle them over to the vice president and then take them back. The other one is when the concern is external and ousting in a legal form is wanted to be achieved. But that requires the participation of the vice president and some number of the cabinet, and then an approval process in Congress, and the president has the capacity to contest it, rebut it, and then it kicks over to this other cyclical process of trying to get it approved again. So I believe also there's this 20-day window where it's all got to the first round or something, or am I confusing that with the other bit? Well, leave it alone. Impeachment, which, some people have a pretty bad taste in the mouth about because, well, we've already been there and done that, haven't we? And we can get into the tried and true and well-trodden arguments and counterpoints about impeachment numero uno. But here's a fun salient fact about the impeachment process in general that's valuable in this current moment, in my humble opinion. To the best of my understanding, although there is, of course, debate and division about this, it is possible, especially since he is currently still in power, and he's not offering to resign and walk away in peace, and abdicate his call for the base to fight on. Impeaching him, even though there's only 13 days and the entire process would take much longer, means that a successful conviction would revoke the pension, the travel allowance, the Secret Service detail, and if you add that extra bonus bit, which I thought was included, and I realized I've updated my understanding of it as a separate thing. It's a separate sort of, you got to vote, another vote, and that vote's got to win all over again. But it should be a pretty easy one to add as an addendum, and I think they should update it and include it just for a winning conviction and impeachment. But a retraction, being barred from running for office, which is a fair and valid repercussion for someone with political aspirations of creating a dynasty family in the most innocent versions of how you may interpret the Trump family, objectives or political goals, and or truly trying to establish through the usurpation of democracy by breaking democracy, some sort of democratic tyranny, which is, not so outrageous and not beyond the scope of what he seemed to be toying with. Barring him, and I don't know if it would require also bringing articles of impeachment, because they are in appointed offices, aren't they? But against his family members is something I want to be on record right now as saying that if no one's talking about that yet, they should be. And if there's a way to bring about that in the state and other various, local and or federal investigations going on into the family members, they should find a way to include and now you're barred from political office for the rest of your life bonus penalty. Because the reason I started Good Morning Trumptopia, the reason I coined the term Trumptopia and Trumptopian Empire, is because of the fiction I'd like to write is inspired by the very scary, weird correlation of real life facts that lead me to conclude that it's not beyond the realm of possibility that they might secretly and almost overtly, semi-openly, have aspirations towards establishing themselves as an empire family that creeps and edges and pushes and strives towards permanent pseudo-democratic power. Permanent faux democratic power. Permanent Trumptopian democratic power. And I don't know if you recall, folks, and dear listeners, if you've been listening to the show for a long time, thank you for being here with me to come full circle and be able to sort of like go, wow, it's excellently applicable, more alarming and applicable in this moment. I would love to go to the Library of Congress to put my hands on this book, and if it's in some sort of like special restoration thing, at least see it through a fucking pane of glass. But it is my understanding, and I do not think it is a hoax, I do not think it is fake. I think it is real. I have seen various bits of people wanting to find out and claiming, yes, you look it up and you can ask the Library of Congress, it is real. But there's a book whose title kind of vaguely escapes me because the wording is fun and interesting, from 18 I don't remember what year, and I'm terrible, I didn't realize I was going to want to talk about it today, so I don't have it in front of me. And maybe if I'm super slick and cunning, I can dig it up. What does it have to do with 13 days? Well, dear friends, that's a big question and a very complex answer, but remember my meta theory about the nature of reality. I'm not going to over-explain it here again because that'll make the episode 7 hours long. So if you haven't heard me explain that yet, put that pin at the very, very top, or however you're organizing your pin board, at the very center, at the most extreme level of like, this is next. I need to hear what he's got to say about that. And find any and all episodes where I talk about the nature of reality and what I think is going on and how it works. I just talked about it recently, so you don't have to dig too far. And there's also I think at least 1 or 2 episodes where I put it in the description of what I'm going to talk about. I'm fairly certain. And if I'm dead wrong, I apologize. But I most certainly have rambled about it many occasions. Here we go. If that, theoretically speaking, should I be possibly correct about it, and mind you, I'm basing my theory on my own attempt to objectively describe reality as I understand it happening, based on my lifetime of direct phenomenological experience dealing with reality in all the ways that reality comes at us as observers of reality. If reality works the way I think it does, then one of the concerns we really should have is in making sure we close. And forgive me for using weird, like inside the box of my theory language right now without any sort of context in case anybody's really new to the show. But we really should focus on, as a community, as a family of human species that are by nature, by birthright, probability, waveform, function, surfing, divine beings encapsulated in flesh suits, we should organize our spiritual efforts in healing and closing the Trumptopian empire timeline so that it does not come into existence. Because it would be gnarly and as redonkulous as the phrase, the United Empires of Trumptopia, might sound. In the Library of Congress, I know I totally trailed off from this thing. Stick with me. In the Library of Congress, there is a book from 18 Hoofenpfoofer, some year in the ye olde ancient American times, from right around and or just before the light bulb, or just after the light bulb. I'm not sure. Don't sue me for not knowing the exact year. Oh, right, I was going to try to look it up. There's a book that was written that's like about the many adventures of Baron von Trump, or maybe I'm adding the von Trump because I like the Van Trapp family so much, and I've always wanted to Van Trapp my own family and if I wasn't one for making kids, I didn't think. But if I ever did find myself becoming a stepdad or whatever, I was like, let's all become musical theater majors, yay, and make our own family music band. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Swiss Family Robinson or The Mountains Are Alive with Music. I'm talking about, let me see if I can get it to come up on... And it's not The Adventures of Baron von Munchausen. But there's a book in the Library of Congress that is about a little boy named Trump, Baron Trump, who wants to grow up to rule the world, and in order to do so must become the president of the United States first. And then having achieved that, he can go on to take over the planet, I believe. It's been a long time since I've okay, I typed in I typed in Adventures of Baron Trump, and I got the most popular search is Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump. And so it's apparently a book series. And apparently now, probably because people finding it and talking about it and looking it up, it's now available to order online, which I feel redonkulous for, and I feel I've totally missed a whole boat. Because I wanted it from the moment I've heard of it, and I know this at first feels like it's got nothing to do with Donald Trump. And what kind of drives me crazy is so far, and I don't know if they're just keeping it really close to the vest and that's why I haven't heard it, but so far, no one that I've ever had the opportunity to talk to on social media or ask questions from or read posts about that claims Q, that self-identifies Q and talks about believing in the plan and having faith in the plan or whatever. None of them that I've ever noticed, although I haven't probed very hard either, have ever referenced this. 1900, or The Last President. The Travel and Adventures of Little Baron Trump. And there's another one that's apparently the Baron Trump Collection that sells for $39.95. The very first time I looked for this, I did not see online book sales of these books. But there's the Baron Trump novels, apparently written by Ingersoll Lockwood in 1889 and 1893, an American author and lawyer. They remained obscure. Oh my God, this is new to me. From Wikipedia, quote, they remained obscure until 2017 when they received media attention for perceived similarities between their protagonist and the U.S. President, Donald Trump. I came across this. Someone told me about it. I didn't stumble. I wasn't wandering the halls of the Library of Congress myself. But someone had read something about it and verified it for themselves, because you can go to libraryofcongress.com, I believe, or .org or .gov or whatever it is, and find it, because it's there. And I don't know if they've ever PDF'd it or electronified it or not. But as Wikipedia has just updated my own understanding, and I really wish I knew for concrete sure if I've talked about this on the show before. I have the sneaky suspicion that I have, but I wonder if it's only been like conversations I've had with one of my siblings or with someone on the phone, or an audio tape recording I made for myself that never made it on the air, because there's a lot of those. At any rate, I had this image just explode in my head, right? That's the only way I can describe when, quote, inspiration strikes. And I'm a weirdo that believes in doing things like devoting myself to the goddess's muse and praying for inspiration. Inspiration I do not lack. There's too many ideas trying to burst out of my head. It's a curse. its collaborators to collaborate with, like in a writing room, for lack of funds, et cetera, et cetera. But my point is, there's a whole, like, I want to write a whole fan fiction, find out who owns the rights to this, and beg them for permission, and show them, like, I just need, about, like, and they may not like this. I don't know who owns the rights to it, but there it is. It's up online now. But this is the vision. I'm going to share a little peek into it here, and I've done so occasionally on this show. And it's something that I do throughout, and I will in the future, considering that, presumably, I hope this show will continue to grow and will, strive for greater and greater global audiences and success, quote unquote. I will continue to share my own real life ideas that I'd like to create into literature, and they are protected by the fact that I'm sharing them on my podcast, and you're not allowed to steal them. The following, I swear to you, I don't think I'm ripping off from anybody else. I haven't read those books, right? I only was told, this book exists, dude. And I was like, that sounds like crazy PSYOP content. And they were like, nope, here's pictures that I found, and here's, my screen grab of, they showed me their screenshot, pictures that they were shown of the book. I don't know how those pictures were found up online, but there were pictures of like the inside page of the book, the title page and stuff. And then this guy who was talking to me directly in chat, and I don't remember their name, I don't remember who they are. And if you're still social media friends with me, hit me up and remind me that you're the Barron Trump book guy. Was telling me, like, they went to the Library of Congress website and looked it up, and there it is. Fucking find it. And obviously now it's, up for sale. I don't think that the Trump family has anything to do with it directly. And I hope to God they don't own the rights to it, because they will never let me write Good Morning Trumptopia, the fan fiction vision of a steampunk versus solar punk futurism. But imagine a Trumptopian empire, right? For the record, I do not condone, support, or applaud any of the calls for violence, especially by those who are either secretly or openly aspiring it to elevate to civil war. There are people who literally mentally masturbating to the idea of a civil war. I do not approve of that. I do not agree with it. I do not condone it. As a question of fictional literature, futuristic settings, it intrigues me deeply, said the writer back in 1984. Because it's a meta story, right? About a writer who wrote it way long ago, and then it projected a future that was predicted in these other books that he didn't know about. I want those real life, the adventures of Tiny Barron Trump, to be real life artifacts in the fictional world of an author, an obscure author in my own fictional world, that writes a prophetic vision of the Trumptopian empire just before Trump becomes Trump, like before he even hits. So whatever year would really need to be, even if you have to push it back to like 76 or something. So before Trump is a public figure, before he's known as a media darling, or as a pretendo rich guy, or as a scam artist real estate guy, or as a bankrupting casino entrepreneur that keeps bankrupting casinos, etc. Before all that, I want there to have been I'm writing this thing where this obscure guy predicts the rise of the Trumptopian empire through the pendulum swing back and forth of the tearing apart of the United States vis-a-vis the Trumptopification of the Republican Party and the demagoguery that vilifies the evil tyrannical left into becoming the enemy of the Trumptopian empire, which rips the country apart, right? A few years back, my dad actually pitched me an idea of a Civil War book also, a future Civil War between everybody that hated gay people and everyone that supported gay rights, right? And I was like, that's a controversial issue to divide the country over, Dad. And writing a book about them actually taking it to civil war. And he wanted it to end with, not spill the beans of my dad's book. He never finished writing that one, but if if he ever wants to get back around to doing it again, why not? So don't steal these ideas, yo. At any rate, glimpses, right? In the heart of Trumptopia is the great heartland of Guntopia, which is exactly what it sounds like. A Westworld-like gun haven of live by the gun, die by the gun, postmodern American Guntopia. It resides at the center of the Trumptopian empire and is sort of not where everyone lives, but where everyone goes to prove themselves and participate in the blood sport of Guntopian extremes. And there's various sort of levels to it. But the actual sort of residential business empire, the country itself, surrounds that to protect it so that no one can stop you from doing it. No one can take your rights away from participating in Guntopia. And that is the empire of Trumptopia. And it's made up of the constituent states. Now, mind you, imagine the map of the United States. And I am not proposing secession. Secession? I am not an advocate for civil war. I am opposed to that. But in the fictional literary world that I'm considering writing, that I'm slowly sort of drafting out ideas and really dragging my feet about, but sort of basing my entire thing on sort of the moment we're living through now, and sort of why I'm sort of dragging my feet, I kind of want it like this Trumptopian 1.0 chapter to be really done so that I can write the fiction in the brief period of like the early days, the early heady days of the blue socialism tyranny. And I say that with sarcasm, folks. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. So the states around the states that are Guntopia, and this is like dead center of America, in concentric rings. Chunky blocks of the remnants of the shapes of states, but concentric rings. A big bullseye center dot, that's the core. And there's rings within that, and it's multiple states wide. And I can get into the details of each state, but I don't want states suing me for this, this crazy sci-fi dystopian fiction I'm writing. And it reaches up to and includes chunks of Canada and Mexico. They've been all incorporated. All of North America is now one empire. The left coast and the east coast, as they like to call themselves, are the remnants of the opposition to the Trumptopian civil dissent, right? And I had a name for them too, and I forgot what it was right this hot second. And if I rambled about it before, it shall be unearthed there in that content of the podcast. What was it? I think I've either written it down somewhere or have recordings about. But there you have it. And this future, and I've been toying with different time frames to set it in, and I haven't quite settled on which is one of my big delays. And there's also sort of like, we visit multiple time frames anyways, so that gets confusing. Because at the center of my theory, both real and in the world building of my fiction, so there are things that are fiction and totally fake, right? And I'll always try to disambiguate. I don't want to be accused of lying to my audience. This podcast is my opinion show about the real things going on in your real world here on planet Dirt. I missed the heady days of visiting Planet Rock. That was a fun time frame. But I digress. Literary versus real life things should be clear to you. And if they're not, well, we do live in really confusing times where fake news is riddled with lies and real news is riddled with lies and everything is riddled with lies. So maybe I shouldn't flirt with that kind of fiction crossover format. I don't know. I'm rambling. I'm so spiraling out of control. What I suspect will happen within our lifetimes that leads me to want to write this sort of thing is that in real life terms, I am concerned that either Don or Ivanka, or they might like pause and wait, hang back, and sort of be players in the political game but not run for office. And then after long enough has gone by, that they think that they can reposition the family name. Barron, right? That is that kid's name. He's already like sprung up like a shoot. What's that phrase? Sprung up like a weed, sprung up like a acorn plant, sprung up like a... He's just... The kid's grown. And he's been curiously sort of tucked away lately. I haven't really seen him. But... And I don't pretend to know. I just like speculative thinking based on, what I can understand about reality. And it isn't beyond the scope of the imagination, right? He is openly, in real life right now, in real time, as we're discussing this, on the 12th and a half day left before he is politely ushered out of the White House by the Secret Service, as is the protocol. There's lots of talk of Trump pardoning himself and, I think more importantly, pardoning the family. He can't technically pardon himself the way Mike Pence could not have changed the outcome of the Electoral College vote count in the moment at the Capitol building. What he can't do is pretend to pardon himself and then have that overthrown in court, because you cannot be the judge of your own case, right? Like, that's the whole thing. He's going to say that he can. There's no overt text in the Constitution necessarily, but the way that our laws work are not limited exclusively to the, literal interpretation of the words alone. There's also precedent and policy and court statutes and all that kind of stuff that come into play. To the best of my understanding, a self-pardon would be an invalid pardon and would not survive a test in court in a future thing. And even if it was allowed to stand, to the best of my understanding, it would also not protect him against any future criminal liability of things that he has done, no matter how broad blankety he might try to state it or present it, because it's only at a federal level, and he's done plenty of things that violated state laws in multiple states. I believe, to the best of my understanding. Am I going to get into picking apart which ones those are right now at this hot second? No, I'm probably not, because I'm not accusing of that. I'm saying I think that's likely to be the case. Therefore, it helps explain the way he's acting. What do I think will happen in the remaining time? I don't know. I have been really, really, really curious for a long time now whether or not he will go full Nixon and make a show of exiting the White House days, hours before. We already know he's leaving the White House for Mar-a-Lago the day before the inauguration, and he's not going to attend the inauguration. That's almost effing Nixon enough. Which is interesting. Everyone keeps harping that presidential attendance at the next guy's inauguration is an unbroken chain. But, Nixon didn't go, did he? And presidents that died didn't go, did they? But I digress. That's a silly sidebar point. I don't think they'll be able to... It's 60-40. If they coordinate their pressure the right way, they can conceivably convince him to walk away, especially if they broker a deal where he gives up social media, gives up political office for life, and maybe is barred from owning media empires. That's a bit far. They probably can't do that. They can't take away his free speech for reals. He will always have the freedom to organize his business endeavors any which way he wants. And if that means building a media empire, he has the right to do so. As do I, my friends. Which is why I am so humbly pleased every time you join me for an episode. Because, full disclosure, a little bit of bold ambition here. I would love to build my own little talk show radio mini media empire based on this absurdist sort of fan fiction of life brand that I'm engineering slowly into existence. Forgive my ridiculously slow pace and the spirally disorganized way in which I present my thoughts to you. If I ever get my act together and get some funding and hire some staff, become a job creator, and get a crew of people around me to help me give better shape and form to this, boy oh boy, do I have some ideas. And will you be surprised when you come back to revisit the show, because past, present, and future episodes may sound ridiculously different. But I don't mean to advertise something I'm not trying to deliver. I'm just speaking aspirationally. Friends, we live in perilous times, but that does not mean we should lose our shit and call for violence. And never have I ever condoned that. I have understood it. I have empathized and sympathized with it, and I've even expressed how I have known my own capacity to be seduced by it. But I do believe that the calling is to self-radicalize ourselves for peace and dismantle and prevent, hopefully, this real-time mythological building of this Trump narrative, which may be the founding seeds of some future dystopian empire of orange spray tan unintelligible madness. How do we bring a halt to it all? I've addressed that question on occasion, dear friends. And step one is to not fall for the ego trap of hating them as much as they hate us, and vice versa. And, hearing everybody's side out deeply and also holding accountable those that do the most egregious acts, and holding all of ourselves accountable for the energetic ways in which we might have allowed and or maybe overtly voted for our world turning out in the ways that it has. As we surf the probability waveform function, we do not need to manifest more chaos, conflict, violence, and endless butchering of each other and ourselves and one another, friends. For I do believe that is the sickly trap with which the system of oppression tries to keep us caged. And if anything, the denouement and post-show from 2020 have confirmed for me is that Trump keeps proving to himself to be complicit in participating with the system in order to seemingly attempt to achieve his own ambitious goals of gathering power, but that he's not in any way, shape, or form trying to fight the system. He's trying to become the system. We cannot resolve our differences if we are bound up in the mental slavery of hating each other. That's how echo chambers work. Let's not comply with the echo chambers in that way anymore.